Dr. Ruth asked me to kick off the month because it's Thanksgiving to talk about gratitude. And in all honesty, I was a little concerned about being cliche and we just say something like keep a gratitude journal or practice gratitude and everything's going to be fine. And as I was meditating on this, I just felt like, well, when it's actually really difficult to manufacture gratitude if you're really honest with yourself. If you're not feeling grateful, it's really actually hard to say, I'm going to practice gratitude and then just have it appear. Because gratitude in its very essence is so much about this coming and going, this separating and coming back into. And the essence of it really is the dance of the soul leaving and coming back into presence. So that's really what I wanted to talk about today, where we actually can't be really truly grateful without having this experience of separation and coming back into. So in other words, we don't necessarily realize the joy and support of God until we return. So Rumi said, "Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times, come yet again, come." And the invitation here is to return again and again to presence. And, in spiritual circles, we're going to throw around these words a lot and not necessarily have a direct experience of what they mean. But presence really doesn't just mean being aware of the here and now. It's the isness of this very moment. What do I mean by isness? It means the unfiltered living experience of the here and now before any concepts, before any judgments, before any evaluations, before personality and history get involved. So when the mystics talk about direct experience of God, that's what they're talking about, of the right here, right now, not just thinking about it, not just sensing it, but really being directly in it, in touch with God itself. Whatever path that we are walking or working on, this is generally what spirituality is about. It's returning to presence. And one of my Diamond Approach teachers, Hamid Ali, he's the founder of the Diamond Approach, he said the spiritual journey is the longest and shortest path that you'll ever take. Short because it's literally right here, right now. We don't have to go anywhere for it. But long because there are stages of development and we move through them, and there's obstacles and there's barriers and there's metabolism that needs to happen. So whatever tradition that we're talking about, this could be science of mind, it could be self-realization fellowship, Kriya Yoga, Zen Buddhism. These stages are remarkably consistent across these traditions. It's really the development of the soul that we mature into more and more gratitude. So if you think about gratitude then as a byproduct or a fragrance that is a result of this process versus some tool that we're using like a hammer, just like trying to chip away at it, right? It's more this alchemy that starts to happen as the soul develops and matures. So I'm going to talk about that today. We watched this documentary called Oceans last night. And so, they talked about different sea creatures and how they live and how they function. And I'm going to invite you to take that perspective when we're talking about the soul. So there's just a natural development that happens for the soul as it matures. And I want to invite you to refrain from judging yourself on where you are, because you'll recognize that there's some places or some stages that you're in. And the earlier stage is no less important as later stages. So it's not a competition or a hierarchy by any means. So look at this as like, oh, the soul is an organism that is simply developing. and it is happening regardless of whether or not we want it to or not. We don't actually have that much control over it, as you'll see. So stage one, Marianne, if you go into stage one, the search to ease suffering is generally where we start. We all know this, right? This is probably why you're here. Um, and I'm not going to go too deep into the source of suffering today, but there's usually some wound to the soul, and that happens very early on. So some tearing away from the presence or divine being that causes quite a bit of discomfort and pain. And as a way to deal with that, the soul does quite a miraculous thing. It secretes its own consciousness and its own presence to protect the wound. And I always have this image of the oyster when I talk about this, the oyster secreting its own preciousness to form nacre over this little grain of sand or an irritant or as a parasite. And that is actually what starts to form the pearl. So in the same way, the soul kind of does this. It takes its own preciousness and starts to layer itself around this wound. So when I first came to the spiritual path, it was very, let's just say life really sucked. It's really bad. Um, it was very dark. I felt very anxious and withdrawn and depressed. Um, and my first teacher gave me the practice of breathing in light and letting go of everything else, meaning breathing in positivity, breathing in love, breathing in peace, and just letting go of the darkness, letting go of the tension, letting go of the anxiety and the depression. And I did that really faithfully. I did that for quite a long time and was very consistent about it. And at a certain point, I felt a miracle happen where this reality that I was stuck in somehow lifted. And it was as if the sky kind of opened up, right? And so a lot of us have these experiences. We call that a spiritual experience for an awakening to the light that is divinity itself, or the reality of love, the reality of spirit, something beyond our material world. Um, and so gratitude naturally arises there. And um, this slide actually, I think, is a little bit misworded. So we say we practice gratitude to aid our receptivity for good. It's actually more that gratitude arises when we open to receive the good and the divine. So as we're transcending our suffering, we're opening more and more to light and love and goodness and returning to this kind of reality of the divine. So in self-realization fellowship, this stage is a lot about taming the mind and the body, disciplining the restlessness of the monkey mind. Zen tradition does that quite a bit. And science of mind, we're talking a lot about affirming what is true, false beliefs. And this is where the soul starts to awaken to the mystery and the goodness and the trust of God. And there's a lot of growth in that stage. And as the soul develops here, it hits a certain point, and the soul begins to come up against a new limitation. So this might be where practices become kind of dull and boring, and kind of like the life just got sucked out of it because you just have done it over and over and over, and there's like nothing left. So some traditions call this the desert, where just everything feels blah, right? It feels blah. There's no juice anymore. And in that experience, the soul kind of stops feeling the ease of spiritual experience. You've all probably experienced something like that, right? Like in the beginning, it's every single meditation, every single prayer, every single thing that we do seems to open us more and more and more. And then all of a sudden, boom, there's just nothing. Just doesn't seem to come as easily. So we call that the desert because there's a deliberateness to it, because the soul needs to start to turn towards something else. It starts to recognize that spiritual practice to avoid pain and to get pleasure is really keeping the ego in the driver's seat. So for me, it was all about, oh, if I meditate enough, I'll feel better, right? If I'm grateful enough, I'll be happy. If I do my affirmations, then things will change. But at a certain point, the soul starts to feel like it doesn't work anymore. And that means that there's something that starts to open up. So Ernest Holmes said that prayer is not to be used as a means of escaping evil or getting good. It's an act of recognizing the eternal goodness already at hand. So in other words, the soul starts to turn toward more truth. So when we first start being exposed to some of these teachings, right, law of attraction, law of a cause and effect, sort of beginning our journey, we're using this as a tool. We're saying, I want to use this tool to feel better. And we do. And that happens. And then we hit this point where it's like, this is not working anymore for whatever reason. And we need that. The soul needs it to be able to mature into the next stage. And this is often where the path gets a little more real. And sometimes this comes with shattering, like some breaking open that occurs so that there's more room and more consciousness to arise. So for me, this was when the spiritual order that I belonged to split, and the teachers that I so loved and revered were not talking to each other, and the priests and the ministers and the brothers and sisters that I said I'd be soul brothers and sisters for lifetimes just were attacking each other, right? And so suddenly this perspective of only being oriented to the light, that's the goal. We need to transcend beyond our suffering, starts to shatter. It starts to break. And the soul here needs to reconcile its growth in stage one, because it often thinks, well, what it's everything's supposed to be good. Everything's supposed to be peace. Why is this not the case? Why am I not feeling this? And in Christian traditions, we'd call that the dark night of the soul, where the soul starts to recognize that there is in its experience something that is not of the light, something that's not just love, something that's not just peace. And these questions that come force us to seek out what's really true. Meaning we start to turn toward the truth and away from the ego's sort of fascination or attachment to avoiding pain and trying to get pleasure. So in the stage, we start to be truthful and honest about our desire for God. It starts to turn into a way for us to be in a relationship with God and the divine instead of us trying to get something out of the divine. It's a big shift for a lot of us. So we turn toward the truth that we can get triggered, and that there's wounding, and that there's pain, and that there's suffering. So Rumi once asked, if you are irritated by every rub, how will your mirror be polished? He is talking specifically about the ego doesn't like being rubbed. Like, I talk about this a lot, Jai, and I talk about this a lot as parents. Like, we're being rubbed all the time. It's like very uncomfortable sometimes. Okay. But that is the stuff that starts to bring the soul into another level of maturity. So another quote here from A.H. Almas, which is Hamid Ali's pen name, The Diamond Approach. He says suffering is not a punishment, it is a process. It is the friction that reveals the soul's light. It's the friction that avoids the soul's light. So there's this transition that happens here. And we begin to ask deeper questions then, because the soul is turning toward truth. What is actually real? What is this really? What am I believing right now? What am I defending against? What is this discomfort that I'm feeling? So it starts to open to actually accepting and recognizing that there is a wound. And sometimes it's a gaping one. So every trigger becomes a teacher, every reaction becomes a mirror. And slowly the soul begins to metabolize these reactions and they start to accept and work with our traumas. In Christian terms, we might call that working with our passions. In Diamond Approach, we would call them contractions of the soul, like these areas in the soul that are knotted up. And with understanding, with compassion, with understanding, they start to unwind. So instead of resisting these knots, these difficulties and challenges, the people in our lives that kind of rub us the wrong way, we start to digest them. We metabolize these experiences and we stop saying this shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't be happening to us. We start to say, what is this revealing about my true nature? What is this revealing about my true nature, this experience that I'm having? So the gratitude that arises here, there's an evolution to it. So gratitude starts to aid this rubbing and irritation. So there's another part of us that starts to say, oh, I'm glad that this is happening. The ego still hates it, but there's some deeper understanding, some deeper consciousness that's going, yes, this is good. So the people in our lives, the challenges, the not so fun things happen and we work through them because as we're working through them, more and more consciousness, more awareness starts to unwind these and there's more space for love to arise, heart to arise, clarity to arise. And that is what the soul needs to continue to mature. So at some point, we move into the next stage. We realize that the outer storms are not so debilitating anymore. They don't seem to rock us as much. We have enough of a foundation that life and our own inner experience isn't so overwhelming. And as the soul develops and matures, we start to really look at pain in a different way. We don't necessarily think of it as a negative thing, but as contracted awareness, contracted consciousness, the contraction of pure knowing and divinity itself that came in to protect us from the wound, from the tear in the fabric of the soul. So as we do this, and Miriam, we can go to the next slide, a new kind of gratitude starts to arise for this false self that we've developed so meticulously, that we've tried so hard to present in a particular way. And we start to open to the possibility that this false self and false shell, this persona that we've developed and have been so attached to, doesn't need to be there anymore, but served a real purpose, and that it too arose from presence and pure knowing and pure consciousness and the divinity and love of God. So a lot of us, when we get into this stage, we start to see the false self. We start to see our patterns, our history, the way that we interpret things, and our negativities. And we just go, "Oh, I just wish this thing was gone. I wish I wasn't here anymore. There's the ego is just terrible. We should just destroy it and kill it. Um, and this is a challenging turn because it's not an easy thing to let go and not an easy thing to love the ego, right? So Adyashanti said the spiritual ego is the hardest to uproot. It wears the robes of virtue while quietly strengthening the self. So Marianne, you can go to that slide. I don't know if it's the next slide or not, but yeah, we can go to the next one. Yeah, keep on going. There you go. So this is like it starts to get more subtle, right? You can start to see that this ego starts to get thinner and thinner, but the soul starts to mature and gets more delicate, more sensitive, more open, more spacious, more capable of loving. So in this stage, we start to recognize the I that wants to get rid of the I. Identity starts to become a little more uh, elusive, let's say. So the key to this stage is that we start to question who we have taken ourselves to be. Who is the I that we are assuming ourselves to be? Are we the spiritual one, the healer? Are we the bad one? Are we the good one? Are we the enlightened one? So anything that we're tagging onto our identity takes us away in some degree. This is subtle, but this is what we're working on in this stage. The soul starts to see, oh, this any sort of identity is a limitation. It's a separation, a little more separation from what is right here, right now. The isness of being itself, of being here, being now, without mind, without concepts. Just like when you take, mindfulness practices, you take a little raisin. You're like, pretend like you have never eaten this raisin before, and it is a completely different experience. So it's the same thing with the identity. Pretend like you have no idea who you are, and the experience of yourself will be completely different. So we start to work through this. The soul starts to recognize itself more and more as simply pure being. So even that grain of sand that gets lodged in the oyster, this actually scientifically, it's not a grain of sand, it's more like a parasite. And the oyster starts to secrete this preciousness over and over and over again, thousands and thousands and thousands of layers. And that is what the soul and divine presence, God, universe, being, whatever we want to call it, does for us. Over and over and over again, layers and layers of preciousness that through experience, through the rubbing, through the irritation, starts to create more and more love, individualized in our consciousness. So the gratitude that evolves into this stage is about really just reverence. There's a surrender, a personalness to this love relationship that we have with God. It's why the mystics called this relationship the beloved. It's pure heart of knowing that God has brought us through what we've suffered, what we have been challenged by, how we've grown, and how we will continue to do that. The oyster's pearl never stops. The layers and layers continue to develop. So the soul continues to become more and more luminescent, more and more alchemized with divine presence. So in this last stage, in stage 4, the soul recognizes its true nature, and the false self, the ego, the persona, gets metabolized until it's absorbed. and it becomes something completely different. It's what the mystics would call the true alchemy of the soul. It's the alchemy of realization when the universal and the individual are merged completely. So there's no more me. And this, in these stages, it's not so conceptual, right? But we're opening to a kind of map here so that you have some sense of it. And it's not so linear either. It's happening all the time. All of these stages are happening all at the same time, where we open and we recognize our suffering and we recognize the divinity of the suffering itself and life itself. And we can feel this back and forth of the divine presence and our individual contraction and our individual love and the soul's nature itself. We can feel that development happening if we pay attention. So there's no more me at a certain point trying to be spiritual or trying to attain presence, trying to be enlightened. There just simply is. So this is the realization in some traditions of I am. We realize that I am is just simply being here, simply being without any kind of I. I'm not this, I'm not that, right? In some traditions, we say neti neti. We say not this, not that. We just are. It's just pure consciousness, pure being. And that frees up so much of our soul to be free, to live the life that I hesitate to say meant to live, but really it's like being free to dance with God. And the result is this beautiful organism that has fully developed because it's gone through the stages of what it is, how it's come to develop itself. So the mystics called this the divine marriage. And this is a quote I think that really encompasses that. As the rivers, oh, actually, yes, Rumi, of course. Sorry, I jumped ahead. You are not a drop in the ocean, you are an entire ocean in the drop. And then the next one, as the rivers flowing east and west merge in the sea and become one with it, forgetting that we were ever separate streams, so do all beings lose their separateness when it comes home to the divine. When it comes home to the divine, not out there somewhere, right here, in this moment, where you are, never has been left. So we return over and over again to presence. We go through this process over and over and over again. So as we close, I invite you to inquire into where you might be in this process. Or if you're going through something difficult, are you turning toward it with the same kind of love and support that God is treating and looking at it and viewing it? Are you practicing including your wholeness? Are you practicing understanding what the false self actually is? Do you feel the gratitude for the ego and how it's been integral in your development? And are you allowing the vast presence, the ocean of presence, to be here now? That was a lot of words. Sorry. I'm usually not so. Um, I don't tend to use a lot of words, but I do want to end with a sermon from Meister Eckhart that kind of sums this up. If the only prayer you ever say in your life is thank you, that will be enough. But what is this thank you? It is not of the tongue, nor of thought, nor even of the heart. It is the soul's recognition of God's own being as its being. The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. So just take a breath. And it's this breath, it's the breath that comes in and out, where the divine comes in and out, where presence comes in and out, this dance. And of course, when we're here, there's the essence of gratitude. It's really coming back to the title of the talk here, the mystical heart of gratitude. I'm excited to not play piano for the next one because Jai and I have been working on a song and we're going to play the demo for you. It's not quite done, but it's almost there. And I just felt like it captures the essence of what I'm talking about here today and sharing with you. And a quick backstory on the song is that we played the song at our wedding almost 13 years ago. And it just, we were working on it and we thought it was really beautiful and great. And then it just kind of went through its flow of development. And we thought, oh, maybe we should do something with it. And then we had kids, and then you know how that works. And so all that to say is that everything has its own time. The soul has its own intelligence. Presence knows and is holding the development of everybody here. And it's holding you in love. So if there's one thing that I want to convey is that this whole thing, everything that we're experiencing is in love. It's because you are loved. And ultimately, you are the made up of the consciousness and the essence of love itself. Okay, so Marianne, when you're ready, hopefully it works, but enjoy. If we fight it, we leave you.
This is just keys.